Now, the next speaker we're going to have up is Jonathan Peled. Jonathan Peled is the spokesman for the Embassy of Israel to the United States. He's minister, counselor, and spokesman of the Israeli Embassy. Peled joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1992. Before assuming his position as spokesman, he was the foreign policy diplomatic advisor to the Speaker of the Knesset. And between 2004 and 2006, Peled served as Israeli ambassador to El Salvador and Belize. Prior to that, he was the foreign ministry spokesperson in Jerusalem. He has held diplomatic postings in Turkey and Argentina, where he dealt with political affairs, press, and information. Before his first posting in Istanbul, he served as assistant policy advisor to Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, participating in the negotiations following the Oslo Peace Accords. Peled holds the rank of Major in the Reserves in the Israeli Air Force, where he served for 7 years as an aircrew officer. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Peled.
Thank you very much. Shalom and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's very difficult to continue after Dr. Satlov's very eloquent words. I'll start off just with throwing one general question to begin our debate, and that is asking whether the recent WikiLeaks, which were published in recent weeks, and more specifically the Peled, those revealing Palestinian Authority positions, have advanced the cause for peace in the Middle East or not. I'm not going to address that question, I'm just leaving it as an open question. But some will argue that it has exposed Palestinian Authority positions unknown to their own public opinion, and that is important in itself. Others will argue that that is only going to make the Palestinian Authority even more closed and unwilling to make compromises in the future. The reason why I raise this question is this is exactly the dilemma we face when we discuss diplomacy versus public diplomacy. As you know, diplomacy is the art of trying to achieve interests, but usually trying to do it in a less public fashion. Public diplomacy, on the other hand, has a different dimension to it. And I would say that not all diplomacy should be public, and by the same token, not all public diplomacy should be diplomatic. But there is one common denominator that both standard, if you like, diplomacy and public diplomacy share, and that is the premise of dialogue rather than of sales pitch. And that is one of the points which I would like to briefly focus on in the few minutes that I have to discuss Israel's public diplomacy objectives, the challenges, where do we stand, and my humble suggestion on how best to address these public diplomacy issues that we have here in the United States. Let me start off by saying that in general, Israel has 3 public diplomacy goals which are relevant for Israel's public diplomacy worldwide. First of all, it is to gain support for the policies of the elected Israeli government. Secondly, it's to deepen and strengthen Israel's bilateral relations, in this case with the United States, in a way that fosters our special relationship between Israel and the United States. And in this aspect, public opinion plays a very critical component in this special relationship between Israel and the United States. The third objective is to promote and represent Israel in the public domain in the United States. If you like, some call it image branding, others call it by different names. The idea is to represent Israel, all its facets, political, social, cultural, in the United States. Where do we stand today in the United States? First of all, I have to tell you that as an Israeli diplomat in the United States, I thank myself every day that I'm not currently serving in Europe. The situation there, believe me, is far worse. Nonetheless, where do we stand here in the United States today? Both politically and publicly. First of all, polls consistently indicate that Israel enjoys a very robust support in general for Israel and a general support for Israel's right to defend itself. Israel enjoys and greatly appreciates the commitment by successive US administrations to Israel's security. We benefit and appreciate the still standing bipartisan support in the political sphere, especially in Congress and in state legislates. And of course, Israel and the United States share a special bond, joint heritage, common values, and a deeper understanding of and identification with one another. And of course, here is where you so importantly come in as a great pillar of this special bond, the very important and precious Jewish community. Having said that, we still face ever-growing challenges. First of all, we must not take this support for granted. We have to nurture it and keep it going. Secondly, we cannot overlook that there are circles in the United States who are not supportive of Israel, at times hostile to Israel. And there is an ever-growing sense and evidence of numbers growing of those who are either not interested in Israel or are indifferent to Israel. And we have to look well, not only the broader public, but also within the Jewish community. Therefore, we need to first and foremost maintain a dialogue with our natural allies, be they our political allies, be they the Jewish community, evangelics, and others. We have to confront the campaign to delegitimize Israel and the attempts for BDS, the boycott, divestment actions. And I'll refer to that in a second. And we need to seek new alliances and look for new agendas, because Israel is a very multifaceted society which has a lot to show for. And at the same time, the United States, as you know better than I do, is undergoing social, political, and demographic changes. Only recently, we heard President Obama set out in his State of the Union a whole set of goals and priorities for the United States in coming years. And we have to be attentive to this and try and meet our interests with what is going on in the United States. So now that we've discussed where we stand, more or less what are our main objectives, we have to identify the audiences we would like to address. We have to define the objectives and our priorities, and we have to obviously adopt the relevant strategies to carry this out. And in general terms, we need to differentiate between the political domain and the public domain. If you like, I'm referring back to the difference between diplomacy and public diplomacy. In the political domain and among influential circles, we must stress Israel's paramount interests, which are peace and security. The fact that Israel seeks peace, the fact that Israel is willing to make compromises for peace, the fact that we must conduct direct negotiations to make peace, and, not less important, that a strong United States is in Israel's best interests, not only that of the United States. So in the political sphere, stress our paramount interests of peace and security. In the public domain, we need to seek to establish relations with groups and dominations that are either well organized or that seek political influence, such as groups like the LGBT, such as clean tech, green environmentalists, groups surrounding homeland security, and so on and so forth. And with these groups, we need to stress Israel's universal appeal. Here we need to stress what Israel is about in terms of alternative energy, in terms of homeland security, in terms of gay rights, and so on and so forth, as so well depicted here on the screen before we began this session. We need to tackle very carefully and in a very measured way the BDS and anti-Israel campaigns. And we need to maximize our use of multipliers and advocacy groups and make the best of all our communication tools that we have at our disposal. Two words about the BDS, which I think are important to emphasize. First of all, we believe that the BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, is still a marginal phenomenon. But the danger lies in it becoming a normative phenomenon, becoming more cultural one than an academic or other one. And therefore, we have to look out for it, but not, or be very careful not to play into their hands. And therefore, we need to identify what is our best strategy, and sometimes the best way is not confronting it straight on. And if you like, in the Q&A section, we can discuss that more at length. One other point about the BDS movement, despite the fact of it being far more prominent in Europe and elsewhere in the world, the United States has a very influential role in dealing with BDS because of its influence abroad and with certain communities that are existing here in the United States. So, for example, if we have problems with BDS in Ireland, we could, for example, address the Irish community in the United States. I cannot, of course, as a spokesman for the embassy, not go without mentioning very, very quickly what Israel's primary challenges in the context of peace and security are. Dr. Sattler touched upon them. I will do so very, very quickly. First and foremost, Iran. I think there's no necessity in going into that any further. The recent upheaval in the Middle East. Here again, we have once and for all proven that this conventional wisdom that Israel is the source for instability and problems in the Middle East, proven wrong. Despite that, achieving peace in the Middle East is an imperative and a strategic interest for Israel, for the United States, and for the region. And obviously, this recent upheaval in the Middle East carries not only great opportunities, but also many challenges, as have already been mentioned. The paradigm of radicals versus moderates remains as much relevant today as it was yesterday. The strategic threat of Iran, of Islamic terrorism, and of non-state terrorist actors like Hamas and Hezbollah, obviously. And what is very worrying to us, this continued effort by the Palestinians of unilateral action through international organizations, through unilateral declarations of independence, and so on, which are all part and parcel of the general delegitimization of Israel. To conclude, I would say that what we need to focus on, you, us, is what Israel stands for, what our main goals are. First and foremostly, maintaining the political and public support for Israel in the United States, and defending our strategic interests of security and peace. Israel cannot be everywhere. Israel cannot dominate every public discussion everywhere. It is not only about being right, as the famous Israeli expression is. It's more important, or not just as important, not only to be right, but to be smart. We should strive to join the conversation and the discussion where Israel may or can be relevant and interesting. And we have to always make sure that we maintain a continuous dialogue with all those who are willing to listen to us. Let me just conclude with one last word. I don't know how many of you are aware that Frank Luntz is coming out. I'm not here to promote his book, but he is about to publish a book, The 11 Famous Phrases for 2011. The 11th phrase, quoting the governor of Florida, Rick Scott: "Let's get to work." Thank you very much.